Hello everyone! So, in this video we're going to be doing something a little different. Some of you may or may not be aware there is in fact a Go Go Muffin subreddit. I myself have only spent a little bit of time there, but I thought it would be fun and interesting to just pull up a few Reddit threads, see what kind of questions people are asking, see what kind of problems they need help solving, and see whether we can give them the answers they're looking for in this video. And of course to see if the comments that they've received are in fact accurate, and if they are not, to hopefully correct them with the correct information. So without further ado, let's jump in. I've selected a number of threads just to take a look at, and let's see what we've got here. So first up, we have a class change question. So let's read it together. Hello, just a question regarding the Sword Bearer class. Does the different class change mean upgrading your class or giving you more playstyle options? For example, class change 4 and class change 1 of the Sword Bearer class seem like night and day. One seems to be focused on tanking, whereas class change 4 seems to be more DPS oriented. I main a Sword Bearer, so I'm curious how the different class change classes will impact how you play and build your character. Any insights here are much appreciated. So, it's a very good question, and in fact, the thing that you have to understand here is that it is a different answer with regards to Swordbearer and Acolyte than it is for the other classes. And that is because, and until that changes, for Swordbearer and Acolyte, only the pre-class change is really the class change that has skills that are hyper-focused on the support skills. That is, for Swordbearer, the tank skills are the pre-class change skills. For Acolyte, the healing skills are the pre-class change skills. You can still pull those skills when you do the later class change skill pulls, but after pre-class change, class change 1, 2, 3, 4, and moving forward, for both Swordbearer and Acolyte are DPS focused. So no matter how far in the game you go as a Swordbearer, if you want to be a good tank, you're going to have to get these pre-class change skills, the tanking focused skills, powered up and, you know, getting them to gold stars, as many dupes as you can, because that's how you're going to improve your tanking capabilities. The future class changes for Swordbearer are going to be DPS focused, and you're going to further and further and further increase your DPS, but not necessarily increase your tanking capabilities. So when it comes to other classes like Shadow Lash, Wayfarer, and so on, each class change will bring slightly different mechanics and approaches, but ultimately your DPS is going to go up and up and up with each class change. And for Swordbearer, it's the same. Your DPS is going to go up and up and up. And until it changes, we are not seeing any new tanking abilities. And ultimately, you're always going to be running a dual spec playstyle. That is, having your tanking build and your DPS build being separate and having to swap between them depending on the content you're doing and if players expect you to be running as a tank or as a DPS. So, bit of a long-winded answer, but there you go. There's the answer to your question. Moving on to the next one. So, question here, how do I increase certain stats? I've been playing this game for a few days and my level has increased quite a bit, but I'm unsure how stats work. I chose Shadow Lash and would like to know what to prioritize in terms of stats and how to get them. Thanks. So, that's a very good question, and of course the most important thing when it comes to building your character after skills is going to be your stats. Now, I have made several videos both about stats and of course about the Shadow Lash class itself. But let's just take a look here at this set of stats here and see what recommendations we might be able to give. They're obviously fairly early on in their progression here, but ultimately I would give the same advice that I would give to anyone else when it comes to DPS. Certainly for Shadow Lash, you're going to want to prioritize getting your crit and your determination to a balanced and as high a percentage as possible. Obviously this is very, very early game, but just keep it in mind moving forward. As you get more and more gear, as you unlock more Melomon moves, you're going to want to balance your crit and determination to get to that magic number, ideally of around 30%. Now, People in the early game have asked, well, gee, where do I get determination? Where do I get determination? And the reality is when you're in this early game stage, determination is the hardest stat to acquire. That is because you cannot get determination as recasts on your gear until you reach Icicle Gear in Class Change 1. So there are very limited sources of determination pre-Class Change 1. The biggest of that would most likely be Melomon moves, where you can get both the Determination Attack Slot Melomon move and the Determination Endurance Balanced Melomon move. So until you reach Class Change 1, when you can start rolling Determination in your recasts, the early game sources will pretty much be limited to your Melomon moves and one or two other smaller sources. After this, you're going to want to get your accuracy up to 103%. As most of you know, you do have a real accuracy or true accuracy, which is determined by the level difference between you and boss monsters. So when you're in the early stages of a class change or in the pre-class change, you're going to want to get this to 103% because that's what's going to give you 100% true accuracy against those boss monsters. And once you get this balanced out, then you're going to then transition your priorities toward getting more haste and mastery, and of course, additionally, more crit damage. But again, this is a super early stat loadout here, and as you progress through the game, you're going to have more and more stats that you have access to. But let's see here if the comments are more or less aligned. Someone smarter than me will chime in. I hope that he means me. So yes, 100 to 105, yes, makes sense. I think in the early game, even 106% accuracy might be needed. I think in some of the very, very early game. Eventually it'll become 103%, but I think it starts off at 106% accuracy. That's not incorrect. Melomon skills, upgrading mounts, certain skills and talent trees. Yep, I mean, this is all correct. Crit, determination, accuracy, and attack. That's not 100% correct. You wouldn't always prioritize attack over haste and mastery. It would sort of generally be like determination and crit, accuracy at 103 or 106, haste, mastery, and attack in sort of that rough order, and of course crit damage in the mix. But there you have it. I mean, this is such a huge topic, it's kind of hard to just go over it in a small segment like this. But anyway, that more or less answers this question, and best of luck continuing your Shadow Lash progression, and let's move on to the next one. So next up we have a very simple one-liner. What's the best Melomon for a Shadow Lash? Great question. So here we have someone who's responded with one of the early meta builds, which has been made by, I think the individual's name is Pavel, if I'm not mistaken. And this is not incorrect, but let me give a bit of a better response. So the best main Melomon for a Shadow Lash and for all DPS is going to be Demon Hound. Demon Hound is the best DPS focused Melomon in the game, and is so good that you'll even potentially run Demon Hound when Generation 2 Melomon come into the game. So, when it comes to the special skills you'll be running, obviously this is a question about Shadow Lash, so they're not going to have their third Melomon slot, special skill slot unlocked yet, so you'd have your first two skill slots, and you would most likely run, in most situations, your turn, which is the special skill of Demon Hound, plus the special skill of Colt, which is Echo. So those are two damage increasing special skills that are the best for DPS, but you would also consider swapping out Colt for the Book of Answers special skill, which is the special skill of Smarty, because the Book of Answers, sorry, not Book of Answers, excuse me, I misspoke. Book of Answers is better for Class Change 2 Shadow Lash. Please ignore that part. What I meant to say is you're going to run Arcane Resonance. Arcane Resonance, which is the special skill of Thunder, because the added attack on longer fights, specifically on, like, for example, Waves of Horror, or the Slime fight as well, which is quite a long fight, and, you know, maybe early progression Dragon, you're going to get more benefit from running stacking attack from Thunder than you are going to get from a second damage percentage pet, Melomon. So that's how you would approach Melomon for Shadow Lash, and obviously as you progress through the later class changes, you will see some small variations to that, but ultimately it's always going to be Demon Hound, your turn, Echo, and plus or minus a few changes on the third slot once you have that unlocked. So next up we have another question. Next wishlist event for server 1. Any clue on when the next wishlist event for server 1 and global? This commenter says, I read it's every 6 weeks, so it should be either next week or the week after. So I, in fact, just made a video about this. Or, depending on when this video releases, it might be coming soon. So I might have just spoiled that. But, yes, we are all waiting excitedly for the next wishlist event. There was some hope that it would be coming now, aligned with Paper Plane Week 5, so that we could benefit from spending those Melomon resources and also being able to get the 9,050 points required for this extremely important Paper Plane Week with its artifacts up for offer. Unfortunately, unless it comes in the next few days, it's looking unlikely that that lineup is going to happen. But as the commenter has correctly said, most likely it'll be either with Paper Plane Week 6 or Week 7 in the next week or two. Unfortunate, but hoping still that it might line up with the first, well, with this Paper Plane Week 5 that we're currently in. So, next up, we have a question about guild watering. How many times is optimal watering for free-to-play players? Is it 2 or is it 3? Well, the answer is however much you like your guild. But, I mean, realistically speaking, I think everyone here more or less nailed it on the head. If you're a free-to-play player, at the end of the day, if 3 seems like a good number, but nobody is going to really beat up on you unless you're in a very top progression focused guild, in which case they're going to expect you to do all 5. If you do 2, if you do 3, and you're not sacrificing the precious stellarite that you need for the current stage of progression that you find yourself in, then that seems like a reasonable number to me. 3 seems like a good medium, and ultimately you're also going to be getting enough leaves as well for the guild shop from that, which has some pretty good resources like Melomon Move XP, Summoning Strings, and several other resources like that. So I would follow along with most of these comments here and say 3 would make the most sense. If you're in a very competitive guild, you may find yourself being forced to do 5, in which case you just have to go with that and avoid being kicked, since there are some rather competitive guilds out there, as you would imagine. So next up, we have a comment. The server feels pretty dead. I started my first 2 characters on server 28 and it feels very empty. My highest one is level 40 and I've seen other posts bring this up, but I wanted to know maybe it's worth making a new character on an older server. Now, there is definitely a reality to this when it comes to these types of idle games that basically generate new servers on a rolling basis. You're always going to run the risk of the newer servers being quite low population, and that is definitely already the case in Go Go Muffin, where you have the bulk of the players on the earlier servers and all the newer servers are somewhat smaller in comparison. However, this is the big problem. If you then say to someone, okay, well, don't roll on the newest server, just roll onto server 1. That's where you're going to find lots of people who are there and they're going to help you out. The reality of this being an idle game is that you're really going to have a hard time catching up with the players who are already progressed in an older server, because except for the very limited times where we have a level block where slightly slower leveling players will eventually catch up, you're going to be very behind on a lot of the progression that the server has already had access to, not just from leveling, but also from events that have already occurred in that server. So if you are, for example, a competitive player and you say, well, I'm a whale, I'm going to join this server and I'm going to just blast away and I'm going to catch up and be rank 1. You will have a very hard time doing that until the game adds some sort of catch-up mechanics, which it currently doesn't have as far as I'm aware. If you're a free-to-play player, I think you could probably have as good an experience in server 1 as you would in server 28, because this is a competitive PvE game and not a PvP game. That means you are more likely to have higher power players help you than try to sabotage your experience. So generally speaking, when it comes to games like this, I think you would have a fine time starting on an earlier server, server 1 or server 2, as opposed to jumping on the newest one, server 28, because ultimately the player base will definitely be a lot slimmer on the newer servers. So just something to keep in mind, and ultimately everyone else seemed to agree Yeah, server 1, lots of players. Someone said here server 28 is very active, so maybe this person just doesn't have a good metric when it comes to server activity. So for all we know, they could have a incorrect assumption on how to judge activity when it comes to servers. But anyway, I think that's a reasonable answer. Start with the newest one if you want to be, having the best chance of being at the leading edge of progression. But if you really don't care about that, then server 1, 2, or 3, whatever you want. But server 1 would have the highest player base with which to play with and happily carry you through content on your way to catch up eventually, at least in levels. So the next question we have is about Furf Store and Furf Store refresh. Question: do the available choices for pets ever rotate, or is it always Bladehound and Chill Falcon? And if so, do we just get Bladehound every 750 bells? So this is a very good question, and I also have had the same question because, it's been now, 4-5 weeks, and the Furf Store pets have not changed, which is kind of, not ideal. And I'll actually show this quickly in game here, because if I go here, you'll see these Furf Store pets are always the same. It's always the same 6 pets that are available. Now, one thing I will say for those who maybe have not realized this, these 3 epics here, the Black Hole Drake, Snowman, and the Dune Cat, are only available from the Furf Store. These cannot be acquired from normal Melody summons. This is the only source of them once per week, so if you are someone who's looking to be a completionist and you want to collect them all, then you're going to have to get these from the Furf Store. Especially the Dune Cat is sold out, thank you, but the Dune Cat has their special skill which can be useful for tanks, which is a passive HP recovery. Let me just quickly look at that amount. Pets, it is this one here, yeah. So here you go, HP recovery recovers X percentage every 10 seconds. So if you're a tank, there's obviously quite limited access to these tanking special skills, at least from Legendary. So if you're a tank, you tend to get skills from epics or even from blues in some cases, like Cleanse, for example. So just pointing out that as of right now, it does seem like Furf Store is only the Chill Falcon and Bladehound. And if so, do we just get Bladehound every 750 bells? The answer is that's one way to approach it. If you have enough bells, you can also get the 3 epics, like I said, that are only available from the Furf Store, especially if you're a tank. You would try to get the Dune Cat. I would say Dune Cat and Bladehound, because Bladehound is your best in slot as a tank. So there you have it. It is strange, and hopefully we will see. Maybe when the next wishlist comes, that's going to be when the Melomon rotate. So that's my there's my on-the-spot theory. Maybe we're going to get a rotation of new available legendaries in the Furf Store when the next wishlist event comes. Maybe I'm coping, but let's see. So next up, interesting question here. Is mastery just as important as crit and determination? Like the title, I've noticed I have more crit, determination, and attack than most, but my mastery is only 7%. I'm losing out in DPS to people with 20 mastery even. Should I prioritize mastery over raw attack on my reforges? Now, I actually don't fully agree with some of these comments, but let me give my take on mastery, because mastery is actually a very important stat, and I've made this clear in my previous videos, but let me make it clear here again. Mastery, as a stat, what it does functionally is it is final damage increase. And the mastery percentage you have is the percentage of final damage increase. So what does final damage increase mean? If you have an attack that's going to hit the enemy for 100 damage, and you have 30% mastery, that attack will deal 130 damage, because you're getting a 30% increase in the final damage amount. That means the post-combat calculation amount. That means the mastery, what's interesting about mastery compared to all the other stats is it is a post-calculation application, meaning when you have crit and determination, crit damage, and whatever else, defense reduction, and all these calculations are happening in this quite complex combat formula, and then mastery takes that final amount and simply increases it by a percentage. So it's quite powerful in that regard. Now, in the early game, you're not going to have access to as many stat sources to be able to get lots and lots of mastery. But as you progress into Class Change 1 and Class Change 2, and you start unlocking mounts and cat buns and all these other sources and plenty of artifacts, 3 different artifact zones worth of artifacts, you're going to have more and more access to all these stats. Now, every class has slightly different priorities when it comes to choosing which stats, but generally speaking, at least in how things are progressing, you are going to want to prioritize mastery. Certainly, I would say higher than raw attack most cases. So you would go with your usual crit and determination balance, accuracy as well to the level you need it to be, and then haste and mastery. I think usually mastery we like to aim for the 30 to 35% mark like most of the other stats before you start getting hit with diminishing returns. So that pretty much answers that. It is definitely an important stat and can greatly increase your overall damage output. And so I would suggest that this person should try prioritizing mastery over raw attack on their reforges and see if it does increase their overall damage output. My guess is that it would. Now we only have 2 questions left. Let's jump right into the next one and see what they have to say. Auto fight function. How do you activate the auto fight function with the bosses so that you will progress while being AFK? Now, unfortunately, and this is something you'll figure out quite early on, but unfortunately, there is no way for the game to auto progress to new stages, fight new bosses, and progress you until you reach the next level lock. You can AFK once you reach a level lock, the maximum stage you can reach before it says reach X level to progress. And once you reach that final stage, your character will automatically fight normal monsters, elites, and bosses, so you don't have to do anything. But it's extremely important in the early game, especially when you're unlocking new stages and new bosses quite often. You don't want to let your character linger for many hours while sitting at a stage increase where you can go to the next stage or fight a boss or increase the current stage you're fighting in. And you're always going to want to push to the highest stage you possibly can at all times. So in the very early game, myself and many other the highly keen players were in fact setting alarms. I found myself waking up at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. It didn't matter. If I knew that the next stage would be unlocking in the middle of the night, I would set an alarm and go there to change to the next stage, because there's no way to fully AFK it. It requires either you or the companion that you're running with to manually progress to those next stages until you reach your next fully AFK stage, where you will then generate resources and AFK until you get to resources and XP until you get to the next level lock, past the next level cap and continue progressing stages. So there you have it. Either you or your fighting partner in the journey need to manually progress these stages or the boss fights until you reach your fully AFK stage, where you're waiting for level ups to progress to the next stage. So there you have the answer to that one. So next and the final question of today's video: recasting gear for 15% stat improvement ? Some legendary gear has this upgrade as part of certain breakpoints, but what does it actually mean? I compared the possible ranges of the recasting stats, and they are the same both before and after the upgrade. So, the top comment here says it's just a 15% hidden modifier on the gear as best as I can tell. Do you need to recast it after getting it, or do you have 15% on what you already had? You get 15% on what you already had, no need for recast, confirming it just increases by 15%. So, do I agree with the comments? And luckily, and this is very rare that I'll ever say this about Reddit, but yes, I in fact agree. This is in fact how that legendary threshold works, which I will show in game very quickly for those who might be confused and unsure about what this is. If you go look at a piece of gear here and go look at the advancement levels, you will see, for example, at T14, recast gear for 15% stats improvement. Now, I was also quite confused when I first unlocked this, and I was like, well, I unlocked this, do I now have to recast the gear in order to benefit from having the chance to recast to 15% higher stats? And the answer is no, you don't have to do that. And you will see actually when you advance the gear to this level, you will gain a combat power increase that is definitely significant and more than any of these other levels that you'll unlock here, and that is because it will automatically apply this 15% stats increase to your recasts just from having this unlocked. So basically the way this works is whatever you have here, when you unlock this tier, it simply just adds 15% to this. It doesn't visually show up here. It's not visible, like you can see this number went from 217 to 240, but it just takes the calculation from the gear, whatever you have here, times 15%, and that's what actually applies to your character. So that's how that works. So there you have it. We went through maybe, almost 10 questions from Reddit. Hopefully you found this formative video interesting. If not, let us know in the comments down below. We're always trying something new. And if you did find this interesting, if you found this as having some helpful information, then let me know, and maybe we'll do another video going through Reddit again and answering some of the questions that are brought up there. So there you have it. Hit that like button if you liked the video, subscribe to the channel if you have not already, and hit that notification bell so you know when the next video will be uploaded. And as well, join the Discord if you haven't already. I look forward to seeing you all there. Thanks so much, everyone, and I will see you in the next video. Bye now.